September 22nd, 1943. 8:12 hours. Fjord, northern Norway. Kapitän-Leutnant Ernst Weber commanded the security detachment responsible for protecting Tirpitz, Germany's largest operational battleship and one of Hitler's most prized naval assets. The fjord, where Tirpitz sheltered, represented the most heavily defended anchorage in occupied Europe. Triple layers of anti-submarine nets blocked the entrance. Patrol boats circled continuously. Hydrophone arrays monitored underwater approaches. Searchlight batteries covered every water surface within kilometers. Anti-aircraft guns protected against aerial attack. The entire security apparatus existed to ensure that no enemy could reach the battleship. Weber's morning inspection of the net defenses was routine, checking tension on the steel cables, verifying that gate mechanisms functioned properly, confirming that patrol schedules were being maintained. The nets themselves were massive structures, steel mesh extending from surface to seabed, weighted to prevent submarines from passing underneath, supported by floats to prevent passage above. German naval engineering had designed these barriers specifically to stop British submarines from approaching German capital ships. The specifications required that the nets could withstand torpedo impact and prevent passage by any known submarine type in the Allied inventory. As Weber completed his inspection and returned his boat to Tirpitz's anchorage, he noticed unusual activity on the battleship's deck. Sailors were running toward anti-submarine stations. Hydrophone operators were reporting contact with something small moving near the nets. Weber assumed they detected a seal or large fish. The hydrophones were sensitive enough that marine life occasionally triggered false alarms. He radioed the ship to request clarification. The response came as a series of urgent commands. All boats to search sectors immediately. All personnel to anti-submarine watch. Possible enemy presence in the anchorage. Weber felt initial disbelief. Enemy submarines couldn't penetrate the defenses. The nets made it physically impossible. Yet the hydrophone contacts persisted, suggesting something was moving deliberately through the defensive layers. At 8:10 hours, Weber's boat crew spotted what appeared to be a periscope breaking the surface perhaps 200 meters from Tirpitz. The object was smaller than any submarine periscope Weber had seen, barely the diameter of a pipe, leaving almost no wake. Before his gunners could train weapons on it, the periscope disappeared. Weber radioed contact report and ordered his boat to proceed to the sighting location. At 8:12 hours, the water erupted. The explosion originated directly beneath Tirpitz, generating underwater shockwave that lifted the 20,000-ton battleship visibly upward before it settled back into the water, listing slightly. Secondary explosions followed as the initial blast ruptured fuel lines and damaged machinery. Weber watched in stunned disbelief as Germany's most powerful battleship, anchored in the most secure harbor in Norway, protected by defenses designed specifically to prevent this exact scenario, was clearly damaged by enemy action that should have been impossible. The subsequent investigation would reveal that British submarines had penetrated the supposedly impregnable defenses, placed explosive charges beneath the battleship, and escaped before the blast. The submarines themselves were so small that German intelligence initially refused to believe the reports. Vessels barely 15 meters long couldn't possibly carry the explosive power needed to damage a battleship. Yet the damage was undeniable, and German divers eventually recovered fragments of the British weapons that confirmed the impossible had occurred. Weber's after-action report stated simply, enemy submarines of unknown type penetrated all defensive layers and successfully attacked Tirpitz. Current defensive measures are inadequate against this threat. Complete revision of anti-submarine protocols is required. That admission that German naval defenses couldn't stop British submarines they'd never anticipated, would transform German naval security doctrine and force massive resource diversion to counter a threat they didn't fully understand. Engineering the impossible. The X-class design prioritized stealth and payload over crew comfort, operational range, and virtually everything else submarine designers normally considered essential. The result was a vessel that barely qualified as submarine by conventional standards, 15 meters long, 5 meters wide when surfaced, displacing approximately 30 tons. 4 crew members, commander, navigator, engineer, and diver, operated in conditions that made conventional submarine duty seem spacious by comparison. The propulsion system used electric motors powered by batteries, no diesel engines that might be detected acoustically. Maximum surface speed was approximately 6 knots. Submerged speed dropped to perhaps 4 knots. Operational range was measured in dozens of nautical miles rather than thousands. The X-class wasn't designed for transoceanic operations. It was designed to be towed to operational areas by conventional submarines, then released to conduct attacks independently before rendezvousing for recovery. This approach allowed the midget submarines to reach Norwegian waters without exhausting their limited battery capacity. The weapons system was unique and terrifying. X-class submarines carried no torpedoes. Their payload consisted of 2 side charges, each containing 2 tons of amatol high explosive. These charges were attached to the submarine's sides and could be released to sink beneath the target ship. Time delay fuses allowed the attacking submarine to escape before detonation. The explosive power of 4 tons of amatol detonating beneath a ship's hull was sufficient to break the keel and cause catastrophic structural damage that conventional torpedoes couldn't reliably achieve. The crew accommodations were minimal to the point of dangerous. 4 men lived and worked in pressure hull barely 2 meters in diameter. The air supply was limited, and carbon dioxide buildup became life-threatening after several hours submerged. Temperature regulation was non-existent. The submarines became freezing cold in Norwegian waters or dangerously hot when batteries were working hard. Sanitation was primitive. Food storage was minimal. Every aspect of the design sacrificed crew comfort for operational capability. The navigation and control systems demanded extraordinary skill from operators. The X-class lacked the sophisticated navigation aids that conventional submarines employed. Commanders navigated largely by dead reckoning, using compass headings, estimated speed, and elapsed time to determine position. Depth control required constant attention. The submarines were inherently unstable and would surface or dive uncontrollably if not actively managed. Operating near the seabed in confined waters meant that navigation errors could send the submarine crashing into underwater obstacles with potentially fatal results. The training program for X-class crews emphasized that every crew member needed to perform multiple roles because loss of any single person through injury or incapacitation could doom the entire mission. Commanders trained as navigators. Engineers trained as divers. Every crew member learned damage control, navigation, and escape procedures. The psychological screening was rigorous. Only volunteers were accepted, and only those who demonstrated exceptional calmness under extreme stress made it through selection. The threat that kept hiding. The German battleship Tirpitz represented strategic threat far exceeding its actual combat record. The ship itself was formidable. 42,000 tons displacement when fully loaded, 8 15-inch guns in 4 turrets, armor protection designed to defeat shells from comparable enemy vessels. But Tirpitz's real power was its potential rather than its actual operations. The mere existence of the battleship in Norwegian waters forced the Royal Navy to maintain heavy units in positions to counter possible Tirpitz sorties, which constrained British naval deployment globally and created constant anxiety among Allied convoy planners. The strategic calculation was brutally simple. If Tirpitz broke out into the Atlantic convoy routes, the damage it could inflict before being destroyed or driven back would be catastrophic. A single successful operation could sink merchant shipping worth hundreds of millions of pounds and disrupt Allied supply operations for months. The British capital ships stationed to counter this threat couldn't be deployed elsewhere. They had to remain positioned to intercept Tirpitz if it moved. This pinned down British naval resources that were desperately needed in other theatres. The Royal Navy had attempted conventional approaches to neutralizing Tirpitz. Fleet air arm attacks in 1942 achieved minor damage but couldn't reach the ship when it sheltered deep in Norwegian fjords, protected by land-based fighters and anti-aircraft defenses. Heavy surface units attempting to enter Norwegian waters faced prohibitive risks from German air power, U-boats, and coastal defenses. Conventional submarines couldn't navigate the shallow, confined waters of the inner fjords where Tirpitz anchored. Every standard naval tactic proved inadequate against a target that remained in heavily defended, geographically protected anchorages where conventional forces couldn't reach it. British naval planning recognized that solving the Tirpitz problem required unconventional approaches. Traditional surface action wouldn't work. Aerial bombardment couldn't achieve decisive results given the distances involved and the battleship's defensive protection. Conventional submarine attacks faced geographical and tactical barriers that made success unlikely. The solution would need to bypass all of these limitations, which meant developing capabilities that no existing British vessel possessed. The X-class midget submarine concept emerged from this strategic requirement. If conventional submarines were too large to navigate the confined waters where Tirpitz sheltered, perhaps very small submarines could succeed where normal vessels failed. If torpedo attacks couldn't achieve decisive damage, perhaps explosive charges placed directly beneath the ship's hull could. If Norwegian defenses were designed to stop conventional submarine penetrations, perhaps unconventional submarines could evade detection. The entire concept required accepting extraordinary risks and technical challenges. But the alternative, allowing Tirpitz to continue constraining British naval operations indefinitely, was strategically unacceptable. Operation Source: the mission that shouldn't work. The plan for attacking Tirpitz and other German capital ships in Norwegian waters represented operational complexity that tested British naval capabilities at every level. 6 X-class submarines would be towed nearly 1,000 nautical miles from Scotland to Norwegian coastal waters by conventional submarines. The tow would take approximately 1 week, during which the X-class crews would live in their cramped vessels, being pulled through the North Sea at speeds that made the tiny submarines pitch and roll violently. The operational concept called for the X-class submarines to slip their tows approximately 50 miles from the Norwegian coast, then navigate independently through coastal waters to reach the target fjords. 3 submarines, X5, X6, and X7, would attack Tirpitz in Kåfjord. 2 submarines, X9 and X10, would attack Scharnhorst in a different fjord. 1 submarine, X8, would serve as reserve. The attacks would occur simultaneously to prevent German forces from responding to early penetrations by reinforcing other targets. The challenges began immediately during the tow phase. X8 suffered flooding and had to be scuttled after its crew was rescued. X9's tow cable parted during a storm, and the submarine was lost with all hands. The conventional submarine towing it never located the missing midget, despite extensive searching. These losses before the operational phase even began demonstrated the extreme difficulty of employing such small vessels in open ocean conditions. The remaining X-class submarines reached their release points and began independent operations. X-10, designated to attack Scharnhorst, suffered mechanical failures that prevented it from completing its approach and had to abandon the mission. X-5, approaching Tirpitz, was detected by German patrol boats and destroyed with all hands after attempting to penetrate the defensive nets. Of the 6 submarines that began Operation Source, only 2, X-6 and X-7, successfully reached attack positions. X-6, commanded by Lieutenant Donald Cameron, encountered defensive nets protecting Tirpitz's anchorage and attempted to pass beneath them. The submarine became entangled in the net's lower edge, and Cameron spent hours working his vessel free while conserving battery power and managing carbon dioxide buildup. When X-6 finally cleared the nets, Cameron found himself in the inner anchorage with Tirpitz, visible through his periscope. German patrol boats were nearby, but none had detected the tiny submarine. Cameron navigated to a position beneath Tirpitz's hull and released both side charges. The weapons sank to the fjord bottom, directly under the battleship's midsection. With the charges armed and timers running, Cameron attempted to escape, but X-6 became entangled in nets again and surfaced involuntarily. German forces spotted the submarine immediately and took the crew prisoner. Cameron informed his captors that explosive charges had been placed beneath Tirpitz, information that German officers initially dismissed as bluff. X-7, commanded by Lieutenant Basil Place, took a different approach route and successfully navigated beneath the defensive nets by following the seabed contours. Place positioned X-7 beneath Tirpitz and released his side charges, then attempted to escape via the same underwater route. The submarine became entangled in nets during the escape attempt, struggled free, but suffered damage that prevented controlled diving. X-7 surfaced inside the defensive perimeter where German patrol boats opened fire. The submarine sank with 2 crew members escaping and 2 going down with their vessel. The explosion that changed German naval doctrine. At 8:02 hours, while German forces were attempting to understand how British submarines had penetrated their defenses, the side charges detonated. 8 tons of high explosive detonating in shallow water beneath Tirpitz's hull generated shock effects that no conventional torpedo could match. The underwater blast wave propagated through the water and struck the battleship's bottom with force that conventional armor couldn't absorb or deflect. The immediate damage assessment revealed destruction that would take months to repair. The explosion had buckled hull plating across a substantial section of the ship's bottom. The port rudder and steering gear were severely damaged. The propeller shafts were misaligned. Engine mountings were damaged. Fuel tanks were ruptured. Electrical systems were destroyed by shock effects. The ship's magazine flooding systems had activated automatically, suggesting the explosion had damaged structural elements deep within the hull. Tirpitz was afloat, but completely combat ineffective. The strategic impact was immediate and profound. Tirpitz, which had constrained British naval deployments through its threat potential, was suddenly out of action indefinitely. The repairs would require dry dock facilities that didn't exist in Norway. The ship would need to be moved to Germany for proper repair, which created additional vulnerability during transit. The battleship that had been Germany's most valuable naval asset was suddenly a liability consuming resources without providing any strategic benefit. German Naval Command's response revealed genuine panic. If British submarines could penetrate fjords defenses, specifically designed to prevent submarine attack, then no anchorage in occupied Norway was secure. Every German capital ship, every heavy cruiser, every valuable asset in Norwegian waters was potentially vulnerable to attack by weapons that German defenses couldn't reliably detect or stop. The implications for German naval strategy were catastrophic. The investigation into how X-6 and X-7 had penetrated the defenses revealed systematic failures that deeply disturbed German naval leadership. The anti-submarine nets had gaps that very small submarines could exploit. The hydrophone arrays couldn't reliably detect submarines as small as the X-class. The patrol boats couldn't spot periscopes as minimal as those the X-class employed. The entire defensive scheme assumed conventional submarine threats and was inadequate against unconventional craft specifically designed to evade those defenses. The terror that numbers couldn't quantify. The immediate German response to Operation Source consumed resources far exceeding the cost of the British attack. Every major Norwegian anchorage received reinforced anti-submarine defenses. Additional patrol boats were stationed at potential penetration points. Hydrophone arrays were upgraded and repositioned. Anti-submarine nets were inspected and gaps were closed. Guard forces were increased and patrol schedules were intensified. The cumulative cost in materiel, personnel, and operational tempo was substantial, all to counter submarines that numbered fewer than a dozen in the entire Royal Navy. German naval intelligence produced assessment after assessment, attempting to understand British midget submarine capabilities. The technical analysis of X-6, which had been captured relatively intact, revealed capabilities that German engineers found disturbing. The submarine's small size made it almost impossible to detect with conventional sonar. The electric propulsion eliminated the acoustic signature that hydrophones relied on. The minimal periscope was nearly invisible even in calm water. The side charge weapons could deliver explosive power that exceeded torpedo warheads while avoiding the defensive measures that torpedo nets provided. The psychological impact extended beyond naval forces to Hitler personally. The Führer's attachment to Tirpitz made the battleships disabling a personal affront. His demand for explanations and guarantees that British forces couldn't repeat the attack generated pressure throughout the German naval command structure. The combination of strategic setback, technical surprise, and personal leadership attention created crisis atmosphere that affected German naval operations broadly. The strategic diversion was perhaps most significant. German forces that should have been focused on convoy interdiction, anti-submarine warfare, or other operational priorities were instead consumed with defending against British midget submarine threats that might or might not materialize. The uncertainty was operationally corrosive. German commanders couldn't know where British X-class submarines might attack next, which meant they had to defend everywhere. This distributed defensive effort consumed resources without corresponding offensive benefit. British intelligence monitoring of German naval communications detected the panic that Operation Source had generated. Kriegsmarine signals traffic revealed extensive discussions about midget submarine threats, demands for improved defenses, and debates about whether German capital ships should be relocated from Norwegian waters entirely. The intercepts documented that the British attack had achieved psychological effects far exceeding the physical damage. German naval leadership was genuinely frightened of weapons they didn't fully understand and couldn't adequately defend against. The weapon that proved size doesn't matter. The X-class midget submarines represented triumph of creativity over convention, determination over resources, and courage over comfortable tactics. They were tiny, barely larger than buses, smaller than many yachts, dwarfed by every conventional military vessel. They were uncomfortable to the point of dangerous. Crews endured conditions that would be considered torture in any other context. They were limited in every way that conventional military planning considered important. Short range, slow speed, minimal weapons load, no defensive armament. Yet they accomplished what Britain's largest battleships and most powerful aircraft couldn't. They reached Tirpitz in its most protected anchorage and disabled the ship for the remainder of the war. They forced German naval leadership to recognize that their defensive doctrine was inadequate against enemies who didn't fight conventionally. They consumed German resources through defensive requirements far exceeding the cost of British offensive operations. They demonstrated that in warfare, the weapon that matters isn't necessarily the largest or most powerful, but the one that can reach targets others cannot. The crews who volunteered for X-class operations understood they were accepting risks that exceeded normal military service. They operated vessels designed to minimize everything except payload and stealth. They endured conditions that tested physical and psychological limits. They faced enemy defenses specifically designed to destroy submarines, attempting exactly what they were attempting. They did all of this knowing that survival was uncertain, and that capture, if they survived their submarine's destruction, meant years in prisoner of war camps. They volunteered anyway because the mission mattered more than personal safety. Tirpitz had to be stopped. German naval forces had to be constrained. The strategic situation demanded actions that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. Someone had to crew those tiny submarines into Norwegian fjords through defenses that killed most who attempted it. British submariners stepped forward because that's what service required when the alternative was allowing German naval forces to continue threatening Allied operations unopposed. The Germans laughed initially when intelligence reported that British forces were using submarines barely 15 meters long. They mocked the concept of vessels so small, attempting to attack battleships protected by layered defenses designed specifically to prevent submarine penetration. They believed their engineering and their planning were superior to any threat British forces could develop. They stopped laughing when Tirpitz's hull buckled under the force of British explosives placed there by submarines that weren't supposed to be able to reach the target. They stopped mocking when they realized their defensive doctrine was inadequate against enemies who refused to fight conventionally. They developed respect, grudging but genuine, for British submariners who possessed courage to attempt missions that seemed suicidal and skill to succeed despite overwhelming odds. The tiny X-class submarines terrified the German Navy because they proved that Britain could strike anywhere, regardless of defenses, using weapons that German forces couldn't reliably detect or stop. That terror was strategic victory more profound than sinking ships. It forced German forces into defensive postures, consumed resources in futile defensive measures, and created psychological burden that affected German naval operations long after the physical damage had been repaired.